the Awaken Your Ego podcast with Joann and Ariana. We are a health podcast that explores topics to do with biohacking and self-discovery.
We are also on the self-discovery journey, and we want to attract listeners that are doing the same in order to help them realize they're not alone.
Ego differs from conventional medical spas and wellness centers. We believe that the secret to maximizing one's sense of self is in addressing the entire person, inside and out. We provide state-of-the-art aesthetic treatments as well as lifestyle management and holistic health solutions. We aim to please with our efficient and friendly customer service and guarantee with our scientifically proven alternative therapies and lifestyle optimizations that every patient will leave our care with a boosted ego. Our goal is to help our patients realize the necessity of self-care and to encourage them to prioritize their health and wellness goals. When we make self-care and confidence a priority, then we're able to bring to light our potential for happiness and growth. This podcast is a way to expand our reach so that we are able to spread the word on the importance of self, the whole self, inside and out.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. Please reach out to your medical provider if you have questions about any of the treatments we discuss to see if it's a right fit for you. Now on to our show. All right, welcome to another episode of Girl Talk for Awaken Your Ego podcast.
Yes.
We're so excited to have Brenna join us in today's episode.
Always a pleasure.
So today we want to get in depth about emotional vulnerability. So to start off, we want to talk about how did you witness emotions or vulnerability in your home?
Well, and so to preface this too, I think this has a lot to do with like our inner child work that I think a lot of people have been talking about, healing your inner child. And I think with Liset, we've all kind of done a thing
session,
with her,
a private session
with her about healing your inner child. So that's why we wanted to talk about this. But I mean, for me, emotion, I really felt like we didn't have time for it. Like I felt like whenever we had emotions, it was almost like, okay, like you can be sad, but we don't really have time to be sad. So we like be sad, but like hurry up, we gotta go. So it's almost like for me, I almost felt like we just like, I don't have time for emotions. Like it's just like they're too much.
Well, and this will be interesting talk because me and Brenna are sisters, if any of you forgot that fact. But we grew up in a family of 6 kids, and I think for me, it almost just felt like it was a burden. Like you said, like we don't have time for it. And it was as a child, I almost felt like, okay, go away. You know, like I felt like that was the message I felt from my mom, not necessarily that she was doing that in specific, but it was like, okay, you're crying, go to your room, figure it out, come back when you're ready. So it almost felt like a very intimate, like secret thing, something you shouldn't burden other people with. It was like, go and come back when you're ready.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. See, I grew up in a Latin home where emotions were basically seen as a weakness.
Yeah.
So my mom was a very strong Latina woman, very feisty, but when it came to anything that would, you know, be considered vulnerability, she just would not show it. And it wasn't that it was any negative way. It was just that she taught us to be strong. And in her perspective, tears were a form of weakness. Like, don't let anyone see you cry. Mm-hmm. You got to just get up and keep going, which I understand that from a single mother. But in a sense is I was a very emotional child. So for me, that was very, very hard. So in a sense, kind of like you guys, like if I wanted to cry, it's like, go, I don't want to deal with it. Just be quiet, sit there and breathe. Don't talk.
Yeah, like figure it out.
Well, and then furthermore, it was like it also limited those kind of conversations. Mm-hmm. It's like it wasn't an open convo to talk about our feelings or how we feel or like what's going on in our brains. It wasn't like that wasn't on the docket. It's like we got to keep going down the list of things to do.
And we could very much tell that she was stressed and overwhelmed. So it's like we kind of knew that and she didn't really have to say it. But at the same time, we all felt it.
Yeah.
So in the sense, it's like, okay, we were modeled that it's okay to stress out and be frustrated, but when it comes time to crying and releasing it, no. that's not a safe space.
Well, I was talking to actually a girl that we work with, and we're just talking about how the fact, like, her mom was very similar, like, kind of raised her to not show her emotion. And it was just very funny to also think about the fact that I feel like my mom was a very emotional person. Like, she was very overwhelmed, always busy, very stressed. And so it's almost like we would witness her crying as a child, like at the end of the day, but it's almost like she was allowed to, but we weren't allowed to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It like sent this weird message, like her emotions can be honored and she can show those, but we're not allowed to do the same. And so I feel like there is when there's not an open environment to share emotions, yet you see some people that get to share them, it just is like, what's wrong with me? Like, why don't I get to share?
Well, and I think it's like now looking back, I can see like all the adults didn't have the tools to really identify what they were feeling either. I think they were their generation was different than ours in the sense of like a lot of those, they didn't have to, I don't think they were like suffering with other things that were like, whether it's like their parents were in the Great Depression, like, I mean, there's like different. So I feel like this is obviously like learned behavior over generations of like, you know, we don't have time to be sad. Like, we got to put our heads down and work. And I think that's kind of the American dream too, right? It's like, hey, we can make the best of what we have. But I think it's like now we're seeing that it's like not kind of feeling your feelings has a lot of health effects, has a lot of like, we have this mental health crisis, and it's like, we can see that like suppressing those is not really good
in the long term.
But I can see how like it was a survival tactic for a lot of people before us. And it's like our generation is definitely doing things a little differently. And mental health is such a big conversation, even this inner child thing, you know, healing the inner child. And I'm sure that's been around for a while, but it's just interesting to me. I've seen more and more of people really trying to heal their inner child. But before we kind of get started on some of our other findings, I wanted to ask you guys what your experience was like with Liset, with your inner child. Would you be down to share?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be open to that.
Okay, so Joann, why don't you go first? Because my experience was really cool.
Yeah, so I am an anxious person. I know that. I knew that my anxieties came from fears. So when I went in to heal my inner child with Liset, my intention was I want to overcome my fears. And so going into that session, there were 3 different ages of mine that popped up. And the first one was a toddler, probably like 2 or 3. She couldn't really communicate a lot with me, but I kind of knew, you know, what she was getting at. And it's crazy because in this, I guess it's a type of meditation.
Like an exercise.
And it's kind of, Liset, what she does, she kind of puts you in like a guided meditation.
It's a theta, I believe.
Yeah,
so it's tapping into that. So this inner child was very much afraid of the dark, and she was afraid of being alone. And it was just a memory of being at home with my dad, waking up in the middle of the night and he's gone. So knowing what I know now, he stepped outside. But as my little toddler self, waking up, feeling alone, it's dark, I'm thinking, where's my dad?
This literally happened to my daughter this weekend. We were on the porch and she fell asleep, and I came back inside and realized she was in my bed, and I felt awful. I was like, oh my gosh. No, well, I don't know. Because I was outside. I mean, I was right. I didn't hear her crying because I was right outside her window, but still I was like, this poor girl woke up and was probably so scared because we weren't in our room. Anyway.
Oh yeah. And normally we would think like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. But what I realized is the magnitude that took on my nervous system.
Yeah.
So it was almost like an
imprint. The fear.
Yes, it's like fear of being alone and in the dark. And I can relate that to multiple things in my life. But generally that was the fear that I had. I really liked doing the session because Liset has you gift something to your inner child. And with her, I felt like she was just very affectionate. So I gave her my hand. And then, you know, we kind of walked around, found Dad. I told him what I wanted to say, which was ultimately, do not leave me. And what this child really wanted was a hug. So I know like this age was just very cuddly, wanted to be coddled, just wanted that affection. And so that one was healed. The second 2 kind of were fighting. This was a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Oh, interesting.
And they were...
Did they come at different times? Or were you like,
they both just... Because in a sense, you're asking, okay, is there any age that wants to come up, you know, to talk to me? And so both of them were like, me. And I was trying to figure out, like, oh, do I pick one? But both of them were saying a similar fear, because the 8-year-old was like, spiders, we're afraid of spiders. The 5-year-old was like, monsters, boogeyman, Chucky, you know, all like the
how interesting.
spooky, scary
But
stuff.
your intention was to like conquer fear, right?
Conquer
like that was
fear,
your.
yes.
So that's interesting that it was like those ages
But if
and
you
those very
know
specific
me,
fears.
I am chicken shit. Like, I know vampires aren't real. I know monsters aren't real. I know zombies aren't real. But I still get so scared.
Yeah.
Like, and again, this is imprinted on my nervous system. And I know that growing up, especially that 5-year-old self, I was bullied by my older siblings. And it's so simple to being teased. Like, oh, Chucky's going to get you. Or the boogeyman's going to get you. But my nervous system was so delicate that I was literally afraid.
Like, terrified.
Yeah. So both of them kind of came up wanting to heal that. And so I gifted them swords. And it turned into a game of, let's go find those monsters. Let's fight them. Let's conquer them. And after they felt confident within themselves, the 8-year-old was ready to be released, and the 5-year-old still stayed. And so when I asked this 5-year-old, sorry, I knew I was going to cry, she had a different kind of fear, and it was linked with shame. And this was kind of a delicate situation for me, but I knew it was something that I ultimately wanted to conquer.
Yeah.
Because it had a lot to do with my self-worth. And this one was basically saying that we are very confused. We are very afraid of being put down because of something that happened to us. And this was tied into, at that age, being sexually abused. And so my mom at the time, and this is just a lot of memories that I repressed, but I knew, like, at some point I need to heal them. So I don't remember the exact moments, but I knew my mom kind of had an idea. And this had to do with an older brother. But basically the shame was from being told that, you know, you are dirty, you are shameful, like, this is bad.
This is your fault.
Yeah,
somehow.
This is your fault. Even though I was ultimately a victim.
You're an innocent 5-year-old.
Yes. Yeah. But the shame that this child was carrying was that we don't feel like we have any value.
Yeah.
And so with that child, I gave her a light. One, to kind of help her understand that you are not alone. Mm-hmm. And that love, that light ultimately represented love. And basically I told her to hold on to that and let it shine, because ultimately what that child was, and I felt like at that age, I was very emotional, very just like lively, but that shame that it carried kind of dimmed that light. And I noticed that at that age is where I started to kind of just repress my emotions. And so with that too, I also got the chance to have my mother come up, tell her what I wanted to tell her, and heal that as well. Yeah. And ultimately it wasn't blaming her. Like, I didn't have any blame, because I did ask her, you know, why did you handle it the way that you did? And she also expressed that she was afraid. Yeah. And so, you know, I kind of made my peace with her with that. And, you know, I was able to let that 5-year-old go. But healing that, I realized how each of those fears have tied into myself as an adult, you know, and it was honestly really empowering for my adult self to be able to help parent my younger versions and also gift them something. Mm-hmm. So, yes.
Wow. I didn't realize yours was so deep. Like, I mean, we talked about it briefly, but I wouldn't have asked. Like, dang, girl.
Well, put me on the spot, Brenna.
No, but that's, I mean, I think it's also beautiful because, you know, your mom's passed away. And I think even, like, you being able to, like, ask her that question, it's, like, really beautiful that you can kind of heal that and also have that, like, connection with her after she's passed.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of people don't realize, like you said, how these little instances that seem very small, right, and very like a little blip in your history, it's like still are imprinted and having an effect on how you carry yourself and in your adult life. It's like, I think that was so cool about that inner child work, is that you're making this connection and reassessing what you think about it, and then you're moving forward with like a newness. It's like, hold on, I don't still need to have this imprint. I'm ready to release it and reestablish what that looks like for me. I think that's what's so powerful about like those little meetings.
Yeah, and all of it was basically in my subconscious.
Yeah.
So that's like, it's all been there. I've been carrying it. And after healing it, I was able to identify how I was still in fear in my present day with relationships, with, you know, how I feel about myself, my self-esteem, my self-worth. So afterwards, it felt really like relieving. I was super exhausted after that session because it's like, oh my gosh, like letting this out was like how exhausting, how overwhelming, and how heavy this has been.
That you've been carrying it for so long.
Yeah.
And that's like really, really cool. And that's actually really cool that, I mean, because my experience wasn't the same, and you had like 3 ages, but also you had the intention beforehand of like, I want to conquer this fear. And it's interesting to me that those 3 ages like were like, here I am, here, let's do this. And I think it's also really cool that you give them swords, because then that you guys were playing. And that's the one thing about like the inner child work, or even the sessions with Liset, is kind of like looking at what pops up in your brain and kind of how you interpret the information.
Or like not judging it, but allowing it.
But it's like almost like with the swords, it's like you gave your kids, your inner child, something to protect themselves with, but also a way to play, because you said they were playing with it. It was like, oh, here, play. Like, this is, let's be more playful. And you said that you've been trying to be more playful recently.
Oh, yeah. No, and after I thought about it, I was like, I should have gave them lightsabers. Like, that would be more me. But yeah, it's really neat how tapping into your inner child, you're able to remember who you were as a child. And my natural playfulness, I was very creative. I could describe myself as this big ball of energy, which at the time it was too overwhelming for my mom, her being a single parent with 6 kids. So that's why I know she just tried to like dim that. Yeah. But that's why I gave her a light, because it's like, no, girl, that's what you are. Like, you are that.
You are the light.
Don't be afraid to be too much, too loud, too energetic, because really, like, that's who I am at the core. Yeah. And if I release that, it's like I'm tapping back into it and allowing that child to have a space with me too. It's like, I'm not going to dim you. Like, you can be with me.
That's beautiful. And I feel like since having kids, I always felt like since having kids and becoming a mother, I really felt like, I'm like, wow, they come out so perfect. Like, they are so beautiful. Like, I wish I could see myself the way I see my kids. Because it is like, they just are these beautiful, perfect, like, they come out perfect. Like, and then life taints us all a little bit. And it's not even just life, it's society, it's culture, it's people, it's whatever. Situations.
Like weird situations. Yeah.
And I think that's what's like really been so beautiful for me about motherhood, is like seeing how like their worth is so beautiful. They come out the womb.
Well, and it's like there. Kids come out knowing exactly what they want. They're not scared to say what they need. And it's like, it's the parenting and the nurture that starts putting walls up. Like, oh, I guess, like you said, oh, I'm too much. I need to be quiet. Like, I can't be this big. I need to just take up a small space in the room. But it's like, that's conditioning. Yeah. Like, I feel like a baby only knows their needs. Yeah. And it's like, as an adult, a lot of people struggle with voicing their needs because we've been taught that's not what you do. Yeah. So.
Well, and it's like learning how to parent yourself, nurture yourself, build like boundaries for yourself, because as parents we're meant to like coach and teach our kids, hopefully, to make good decisions as adults and be functioning people. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to parent themselves one day. Like, I won't be their mother. I mean, I won't be there to do
and I think a lot of people think like, oh, it's the past, whatever, it happened, it is what it is, it's done. And it's like, no, like, that all has an effect. Like, it's okay to look back and reassess and then move on. And I think that's such an important piece. And that's why I think this inner child work is so important and vital and like mind changing, like life changing, because it gives you the opportunity and shows you have power to look back and reassess and change your mind about what you thought of that and what you thought of yourself
through adult lenses. Yes. Like and so then you have more empathy for your parents, you have more empathy for people around you. And it's like, you're no longer looking through the lens of a child where you don't have all the information. You don't have all of the pieces.
It's just your random interpretation.
Yes. And I think it's like our responsibility to really do that, because it's like we're getting information, but we don't have the tools to really translate it. Right. And then it's like, as adults, like, that is the work we should be doing to try and understand, like, oh, like, the things were actually this way. Now that I have a full frontal front, whatever lobe, now that I have a full frontal lobe, like, I should be trying to understand this better. Anyway.
What was your experience?
So mine, I did it because I knew we were doing this podcast. I mean, I knew I wanted to do it, but I also was like, oh shoot, I need to do this. There's some pressure. And so I went in with, I was like, do you have an intention? I'm like, not really. I mean, I don't have anything specifically, but I just want to be open to this experience. And so it was weird. The first child that came up was like a 5-year-old me. And she didn't really say a whole lot. And Liset's like, okay, ask her like what you want her to tell you. And she wasn't telling me anything. So I kind of was like, and I think it was hard for me to like get in the groove, but I was, trying, and she wasn't speaking. But I had a speech, like I actually was a late talker when I was a kid. Like I didn't talk a lot until, partly because Ariana was my older sister and she would like talk for me, I think. So I just like didn't talk. But I think I was just like a late talker too.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she wasn't talking, which was also like funny to me because I'm like, oh, you were late. Of course you're not talking. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So she was like, just like follow me. And so I was kind of following her and she was like showing me this like landscape of like, look how beautiful this is. And I kind of was like, yeah, like, and then she was just like showing me like holding my hand, showing me this beautiful landscape. And then we walk into this like museum and there's all these artifacts kind of around. It kind of was like an Egyptian temple, like really ancient artifacts, but just like a lot of little exhibits. And she was like, look at this, look at all of this. And I was trying to look at the exhibits and see what they were. I couldn't really tell what they were, but it felt like it was like my life. And she was like, look at everything we've done. Aren't you so proud of us? Like, this is so cool. Like, these are all your life experiences. And like the landscape was like, look at the life we've created. This is so beautiful. And it was like this message of like love and gratitude and just like be proud of yourself. Like we did this. And it was like, that was like the first message. And I think I was expecting my inner child to tell me something like messed up. Like, because I feel like,
where's the trauma?
Where's the trauma? But it was like, that's why I was kind of confused. But then it was like, I was just like feeling so grateful. And she was like, be proud of yourself. We did this. Like, all of these exhibits are your life. These are all of our experiences. And these are so cool. Like, I'm really, really proud of us. And so, I thanked her and I was just like, wow, like I needed to remember that. Like, hey, like be grateful. Like your life is beautiful. Like it's all accumulation of events. And then and then she asked me, okay, like second child come forward or whatever, if you want another version of yourself to come forward. And it was like 13-year-old me. And 13-year-old me felt really awkward and really embarrassed. And I was like, why is she so awkward? And she was wearing this like skirt that I remember getting in middle school. Like I remember having it. And I didn't wear a skirt to school until like high school, maybe junior high, but like high school. Because I was such a tomboy. And so the little girl's wearing the skirt. I could tell she feels awkward. And she feels like it was like the first time I think in my life where I felt like I had to conform to other people's expectations of me. And I think even the skirt, I think, was representative of like femininity. And I feel like I was like kind of trying to be a woman, like based on like what other people were telling me a woman was. And feeling like the need to like, oh, I have to wear this skirt so I can be a woman. So boys like me. So, people like I'm kind of
so much
conforming.
Pressure, yeah.
I'm not, so I can be accepted. And I was so uninhibited as a kid and I was so free and I just didn't care. I mean, I liked boys, but I wasn't like, I didn't care how I presented to them. Or even I feel like even with religion, like dressing really modestly was like always part of the conversation. And I think it was like, looking back now, I can see it was just funny because the skirt was so representative of so many things. Like it was just a skirt.
So symbolic.
It was so symbolic, and it was funny because even the gift I gave her was a pair of pants.
I love that.
And it was, and I don't know why, because she's like, "Okay, give her a gift," and it was basically like, you don't have to wear this to feel like a woman. Like you are a woman because you're a woman. Like you don't have to wear a skirt. You don't have to like match anyone's expectations. And Liset was kind of like, more like exploring the feeling. And the feeling was definitely like love is conditional. Like if I'm not conforming to what, my parents want me to do or society wants me to do, then, I won't get love. And it was more like, whoa, I was like basically telling her like, hey, you don't have to wear a skirt. we're fine. You don't have to present any type of way. Like, you are loved regardless of how you act. Like, you don't need to conform to what other people think about you.
Like, just be you.
You. Like, people still love you even today. Like, your parents still love you. Like, everyone loves you. So you don't need to conform, and you don't need to show up in any type of way, because you are a woman, because you're a woman. And it was just interesting, because I didn't even think that was something I was still hung up on. But personally, you know, talked with Liset, I had a miscarriage back in January, and I feel like I kind of experienced it. It was like, yeah, this is something that happened. It's very like a normal, not normal, but it happens to a lot of women. I mean, it's normal experience. It felt like a very feminine experience to me. Like, oh, like this is something that just happens to women. So I feel like I really like understood that, but I think I was still kind of like, I was like, I kind of disconnected from my body a little bit, because it was like my body was going through a lot of hormonal changes afterwards. So it's like healing this inner child and seeing like your femininity. So like my spirit is connected to my body, and like, yes, I had this miscarriage, and I think I almost separated in a way so I could see it as what was happening, but not also seeing that like, oh no, my body needs love, care, and attention and nurturing.
Well, and it's
like,
okay to feel something about it.
And you can feel this way about it, and your femininity is tied in all these different ways. And yes, you had this very feminine experience. There's also sadness there, but like you can show up in the world however you want as a woman. Like, I don't know, it was just a beautiful message. And so to me, that was like my experience, and I was really surprised by it. But it was more just like feeling the pressure of society, my parents' or expectations, and realizing that was the first time that I actually started doing that. Yeah. And then like realizing like, no, you don't have to like
conform.
You can be any, and it's like that level. There was like a spirit of rebellion in me that I feel like I always had, but it was like during the energy, it's like, we love this about us. We love that we're a little rebellious. We love that we're not like hyper feminine.
We're different.
Like, we love the type of woman you are. So like, don't dim that light either. Like, keep doing that. And I think, and that's where, I don't know. It's the energy I've always felt about myself.
I love that you went in with zero expectation. You were just like completely open, and yet you had all of these connections and findings. I think that's beautiful. It's like, it really shows you there is an inner child in you that has a message, and it's so subconscious. Like, you have no idea. You didn't even feel like that was a hang up necessarily. But I think that's really cool about that experience, is like anyone could get something out of it.
Well, and I even felt like there was like more versions of my inner child that I could probably do it again and have a completely different experience. So that's why I think it's also cool, because it was like the message I needed right then.
Yeah. That's what you needed at this time.
And I'm sure if I go back and do it again, I'll have a different experience. But that was like, it was just really, I mean, I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. No, for sure. Especially, I mean, I that you touched on the miscarriage, because I think as women, we feel like, I've also had a miscarriage. There's a piece of us that feels like it's our fault. Like, what did I not do right? Is it that I'm not working properly? Am I not woman enough to, carry another child? So in a sense, it's kind of like, like subconsciously you were carrying that, and it created this disconnect from your body. And so maybe that was the part that you need to heal, is like, no, you are plenty feminine, you are plenty woman,
it's like there's no reason to have any shame or guilt because you couldn't conceive or it's like, I feel like sometimes women put that pressure on themselves. Like they, what's wrong with me? And it's like, this is normal. Like, this happens. It's nothing.
I think it was weird, because I even thought I was supposed to be more sad about it. Like, and I think that's why I was a little confused, because it was like, yes, this happened. I'm okay. It's not the end of the world. Like, I have 2 kids, and if I have more kids, great. If I don't, okay. But I think it was like, like that disconnect from my body, needing to like be more embodied with myself again, of just like, yes, this is something you experience, but we also need to heal together. We can't heal separately. Like, your spirit and your body, yes, they're different, but they work together. It's important that we stay connected. And I think sometimes with emotions, I'll like look at them like, okay, I'm feeling depressed, but this isn't me. Like, I feel almost like a distance from them, which I think is fairly healthy.
Well, and I think that also speaks back to the emotional vulnerability. It's like you've learned and you were conditioned to deny that part of yourself. Like, feelings don't matter. I need to look at what I can control and what's rational here. Exactly. And it's like, not the feelings, put those away. And it's like, no, let's grab those feelings. And like you said, the situation, and figure out what that looks like combined.
Yes, and they're messages to us. So before we move on though, Ariana, tell us about your inner child experience.
Okay. Yeah. So I went in, I didn't necessarily have an intention either. I was just like, wanted to be open. And I didn't even know I could come with an intention. I was like, okay, well, let's see what needs to be healed, And she guided me through this meditation. You know, you enter a sacred space and you're kind of walking along a path. And she was like, go to where your younger self is. And there was this hole in the ground, like literally in the ground, that I had to crawl into. And standing in the middle of this cave was like my 8-year-old self. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. Why the heck is she in the dark, like underground in a cave? Because it was like this clean little girl just standing in the middle of this dirty, dirty cave. And I was around 8 years old. And this girl just felt alone. She felt very sad. She felt like there were no options for her. Like this is it. You know, I'm forgotten, like almost like a misfit toy, like a lost toy. And it's just that overwhelming feeling of sadness and loneliness. And it's like, as a kid, I don't think I necessarily felt that way all the time, but I realizing now, it's like, no, I actually did. Like this session made me realize, like, I think I did assume I was the weird one. I'm the one that doesn't get love. I'm the one that doesn't get attention. I don't get to feel pretty. I just felt very ugly and not satisfied with myself. And all that she wanted was a hug. And it's like, I went up to hug her. And it's like, you know, when your kid goes dead weight on you and is like just laying, she was just soaking it in. And it just felt so good to show her that affection. And I just wanted her to know that I was there. It's like I kept having this feeling like, just allow her to know, like, you're here. And it's like, as I was looking at her, I kept having this feeling of like, I am you, you are me. And it's like, let's walk together now. You don't have to hide in this cave anymore. Like, and so I just, alone. Yes, you're not alone. And it's like, look what you're going to become. Like, don't hate yourself. Look at us now. And it was just this awesome feeling of like pulling her out of the cave and be like, let's walk together. And I didn't realize I was suppressing all of those negative feelings about myself, my worth, how I felt about my body and my look, and feeling like I'm uniquely going to be alone forever and no one's going to get me and care about me. Yeah. And so it's like acknowledging that, and like the only gift I gave her was a hug, and that's all she wanted was hugs. And and it just having that visual of my mind of like us walking together on the path. It's like, girl, you don't got to hang out in this cave anymore. We don't need to hide this anymore. Like, let's go.
Like, we're not alone.
We're not alone. And it was just, she was ecstatic, you know, and I thought it was just very powerful, to have that mental and that vision of like us connecting and then now walking. And it's like, wow, I didn't realize I was hiding a piece of myself or hiding my insecure self. Because I always view myself now as a very confident person. I don't care what other people think, but it's like, honey, you've developed this mechanism because once you really did care, and once you were really, really sad. And so I can't forget where that feeling came from, but it was a really cool moment. And like you said, it was like very relieving. I just felt lighter after leaving the room. I was like, oh my gosh, this feels just so positive and good.
Well, and it's like acknowledgement, I think. Because I think a lot of times, even when we're sad or we're hurting and we're telling, even when we vent to our friends, it's like, we just want to be acknowledged. Like, we want someone to, we kind of probably want people to share in our pain. But I think most of the times it's like, we just want acknowledgement that we're like here and that someone's with us. And I think that's the thing with the inner child work. It's like, hey, I'm with you. Like, we're fine. We're always okay. Because I gave her the pair, after I gave my 13-year-old self a pair of pants, I gave her a ruby as well. But it was very similar to like the light. It's like, hey, like, you are loved. Like, we are loved. Like, you have this. Like, you will always be loved. And the ruby, I think, was representative of love. And it's kind of the same thing. The gifts that you guys were, it's all love. Like, you're trying to give yourself love of like, we're enough. We're okay. We're here now.
No, totally. And that's all we need, right? To keep pushing along. It's like, we want to be acknowledged. We want to be allowed to share emotion and have them and not feel bizarre because we carry them. Like, everyone has emotion. Like, why do I feel like a weirdo? Because I'm emotional. Like, I just really am. Like, that's...
Yeah, emotions are part of being human. And I think that a lot of the times people think that sadness or even anger are the feelings that we shouldn't be feeling. But emotions are basically signals of approaches, right? How something approached me. Oh, I like this. I'm going to welcome this. I don't like this. I'm going to put a boundary.
This doesn't feel good. Yeah.
Well, and it's okay when your body's expressing emotion and you're like not sure where it's coming from.
Yes.
It's like you said, if it's a signal, it's like, okay, why do I feel like this? Let me take a minute and assess like what's actually making me feel X, Y, and Z. And I think sometimes we forget that step. We're just like, wait till it passes and move on. But that's not actually figuring out what's being triggered within you.
What you need nurtured. Well, and I like to think of it as like kind of like a check engine light of like, hey, I'm feeling anxious. It's like my check engine light's going on. Like, what's wrong? Like what in the engine needs attention, and not even just personalizing the first emotion or like even like, oh, well, I'm anxious. It must be, this person sitting right in front of me. Like in reality of like checking in with myself, like, okay, I'm feeling anxious. Yes, this person is whatever. Maybe they're annoying. Maybe work is stressful, but like, underneath that, why am I feeling anxious?
Well, and it's realizing the trickle down effect is so real, like even genetically, right? Like viewing how our parents experienced emotion and expressed it and allowed or didn't allow us to express it as kids. It's like we're also doing the same to our kids. It's like if we're not figuring out how to assess our emotion, how to re-regulate our nervous system, like how to have positive ways of expressing and keeping some open space for them to express, it's like that's directly going to keep trickling down from generation to generation. And it's like the more that we can be in tune in that and learn from that, the better off our kids are going to be as well.
Well, it's like staying aligned with your inner child and who you actually are, which is like love. I think like we're all love, right? It's like staying in touch with that person, which is our inner child too. Like it is us. How do you feel like doing this work has kind of affected your outlook with yourself, your relationships, even, how do you feel like it's kind of changed how you view things?
Well, for me, I feel like since I've healed my inner child, I mean, I think that the main one was that 5-year-old self was my self-worth. Like I realized how many boxes I allowed other people to put me in, and how I didn't ultimately fight for my self-worth. I kind of just caved into it. But now like releasing that, it's, kind of like this feeling of like, no, I am enough. I am worthy. I'm all of these things. And, I really don't care. Like I used to not care, but now I'm like, no, I really don't feel like I care about what anyone else will say about me because I've done this healing and I know that, I'm much more than anyone else could label me as, So, and I feel like for me, it was huge in my relationships, like my romantic relationships. But it was almost like my kryptonite, like if anything, I realized when someone would put me down, I would really be down. Yeah, and I would I would personalize it and I would allow that shame to take over. But now it's like, no, I don't carry that shame anymore because, I'm free of that. So, I mean, I'm not in a relationship now, so I don't know how it's going to work out. But just with like friends and family, I feel like I'm able to stand up for myself a lot more and really not personalize things. Yeah. Like I'm not going to take it personal because I really do know my self-worth.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you're not going to let the shame dictate your actions either. And I think that's because it's like if you're operating from a place of shame and fear, like that you can't make real decisions there, right? Where you're making decisions out of shame and fear. And it's like instead of using shame and fear to kind of move you to action in a different way. Yeah. And I feel like for me too, even as a kid, I felt like I'm a middle child, classic. Me too. I feel like I have to, I was like I feel like everyone always says, Brenna loves to start fights, or that was like a big thing. Like, oh, you love fighting. And I feel like as an adult, I've really been like, well, I don't stray from conflict. I do welcome conflict, but it's because I would rather do conflict so we can be at peace eventually. Because I understand that there's conflict can bring change. And I think for me now it's like, but conflict doesn't have to be mad or angry or destructive. Conflict can actually be really kind. Conflict can be loving. And so it's like, for me, it's like with my husband, I'm like, I'm no longer going to participate in conflict that's not loving and kind. So like if one of us has because a lot of times it's like, if one of us has an issue, and then we're so emotional about it, we end up having to apologize after and we don't even get to talk about what the original issue was, whether it is like, because it's like, oh, like you having a problem or something you need to communicate, it's not a problem. That's fine. But it's like if you're communicating from a place of like love and kindness and like, hey, I really don't like how you're doing this. It really makes me feel sad, or it makes me feel like whatever, then I can own that too. I can be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me start doing A, B, and C. And it's like, so I feel like it's changed our relationship a lot, because it's like we'll take more time in between trying to resolve conflict, because we know until we're at a place to actually have that conversation. So it's like, if conflict's not loving or kind, I am not going to participate, because I don't want to be the girl that loves conflict. I want to be a girl that, and it's like, so if it's not loving and kind, I can't be part of it. And I think that's a part of my inner child that I healed. Like, I don't have to fight to be heard. I can be heard, and I can do conflict that's loving, and it can be, because that's what it's supposed to bring change. It's supposed to be. So it's like, if I feel myself getting like angry during conflict, it's my responsibility. Like, hey, I can't communicate this to you right now, and even anything you say, I won't even hear it, because I'm already mad. So I'm like, I can't participate. We can talk about this later. Yeah. And so then, and there's been times where we go a few days without talking, but it's like, I think it's because we both want to respect and love each other. So it's like, I would rather that and be uncomfortable and kind of figure out what I'm actually upset about, instead of taking out the trash or whatever it is, like argument. We're actually, and in reality, it's never that. It's like, I'm overwhelmed and I need help. And so that's usually what it is. But I feel like that's been a big thing for me. It's like healing that.
Yeah. I think for me, my daughter's kind of getting to that age. She's 7 right now. And it's like, I've been aware, like, certain things will trigger me, whether it's her appearance or how much she likes herself or how playful she is. And I never felt like I was kind of parentified really young. And I love how free she is. I love how confident she is with her body. And it's like, I was so insecure at that time in my life. And it's like, I think for me, it's helped me place those feelings, because I can catch myself and I don't want to project on her or make her feel any kind of way, but I'm realizing like, no, I had hangups. Like it helped bring that into my awareness of like, if I don't accept myself as I am, I'm not going to be able to accept anyone else around me as they are. Yeah. And I feel like in my personal relationship with my husband, it's like he dotes over me, loves me, tells me how beautiful I am, says all these positive things. And I didn't realize my inner monologue was like, yeah, okay, like whatever. Like I wasn't accepting it. Yeah. And that inhibits us from feeling close, and inhibits me from trusting what he's saying. It's like I always felt like he was just trying to get something from me instead of just being positive, because why not call me beautiful? Like, why not be super positive? Yeah. And I realized it was like this subconscious hang up. It's like, I didn't feel that way about myself, so I wouldn't allow myself to receive it from anyone else. And like, how messed up is that? Like, I'm not allowing this closeness. I'm not allowing myself to feel whole and worthy of any compliments. So I feel like, if anything, I feel like it has helped us grow closer, and it's helped me to look at myself in a different way. Yeah. And take that time to heal all of those wounds of worthlessness and loneliness and awkwardness. And I think it really has helped me parent better. And realizing if I'm being triggered in any type of way because of my kids' behavior or what they're wearing or how they feel, it's like, okay, mom has work to do. They're doing them best. They're living their best lives, being their best selves. And so I think if anything, it's like forced me to reassess all of those feelings and to release them and heal them, so it doesn't affect any of my interpersonal relationships.
When you're parenting more intentionally, I think that's the thing too. It's like being intentional even about the way that you're parenting. You're like seeing that, like, okay, I'm not going to try and like control her in these ways because I felt this type of way when I was younger. You're like being intentional about it, of like, okay, what do I need to do so I'm not projecting this on my child, because she is like free and all of these things which you love, but you're being intentional about it. I think that's the whole goal here. Right.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's realizing, like, as a parent, you're having an effect, whether you're verbally saying something and it's obvious, or you feel any resentment or anything. It's like your kids feel it all. Oh, yeah. It's not just what you're telling them that they're absorbing. They're absorbing your actions, how you deal with situations, examples. They're always assessing and downloading like little computers, I feel like. Yes. And so it's like, if I have anything that I need to clean up and I feel any kind of negative energy, it's like, I want to get rid of that, because I know my kids are picking up on that too.
Yeah. So I think it's called your shadow work. This is what I've heard. It's basically identifying your triggers, your patterns, and your projections. And part of healing that, or I guess working on your shadow work, is to heal the inner child and to dive in deep. So
I guess for our listeners, how would you recommend, where do they start? How do you start doing this kind of work?
Well, for one, they could get a session with our consciousness
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's always good.
Liset.
I think even meditation on a regular basis, like you, and I love journaling personally. I find it very therapeutic. I'm able to get all my feelings out there, and I'm also able to realize exactly what I'm actually upset about. So I feel like whether I'm happy, sad, mad, I love journaling it out and then actually seeing the root of the issue. Like, because sometimes I won't quite know. And then as I'm writing, I'm like, oh, that's why I'm upset. It's actually all about this one thing. So I think by taking time to meditate and be still, and then doing a practice that you enjoy, like say for me journaling, I feel like you can come up with those things and pinpoint the triggers and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also a way to release it too. Once you make those connections and you identify it, also telling yourself you are letting it go. And I like to also write out what I'm allowing. Like, I'm releasing this self-judgment and I'm allowing myself to love myself purely. I'm allowing more opportunities for me to feel more in tune with myself or whatever it is. So I really like to add that piece to it too.
Well, I love that. And I think something that I'll do quite often is almost like, because a lot of what we learn is from our parents, right? Of like acknowledging, hey, thank you, parents, for showing me this, but no, thank you. I'm going to do it different. It's like acknowledging where it came from and even showing gratitude, and then saying like, but I no longer am going to subscribe to this cycle of dealing with life. Like, I thank you for showing me what I don't want to do. I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that self-acknowledgement of like, no, this did hurt. This did have a negative effect, but now we have the power to change it and be completely new.
Yeah. When I think even writing down like my negative thoughts throughout the day was really like, and seeing that they don't even really make sense. Like my negative self-talk, like what it actually is, which a lot of the time it was like, you have to do everything yourself and no one has your back. And so, and it was like, that's like one of the things that I think I fell back on, like, oh, no one has my back. Like I have to do everything myself. And then it was also like, but you're never doing enough. And I think just seeing like the kind of how silly that was of like, so if I have to do everything myself and then I'm constantly never doing enough, I'm like literally setting myself up for failure, where I'm like constant judgment and then I'm just taking on more work so I can feel fine. It's like,
well, and objectively
knowing you're a hyper productive person.
Yes.
It's like, wait a minute, if I'm super productive yet I still feel like I'm enough, who gets to feel like enough?
It'll literally never be enough. It's like the math equation, it like was a light bulb for me. It was like, this math equation makes no sense. It's like 1 + 2 = 10. And I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense, guys. Like this can't equal 10. And it was like, I think in that moment seeing, I'm like, oh, so when I get in these cycles of like, I feel like I'm never doing enough and I always have to do it myself, I need to then ask for help. Because one, you can't do everything yourself. And two, like, it's enough. Like what
your self-acknowledgement.
Yeah, but it's like that. So when I find myself trying to like be hyper vigilant, overproductive, and like, okay, well, no one can do this. Well, I'm the only person that can do this. It's like, that's that anxiety to me is when I have to then sit and be like, I'm starting to feel this feeling. This means I need to ask for help. This means I need to organize my day. So it's like now that anxiety is teaching me, it's like I'm able to move through that feeling of like, I'm getting this message again. Okay, I need to reprioritize where I'm at.
Where you're using it as a tool instead of a disability kind of thing.
Exactly. Instead of it dictating like, okay, because before I would let it determine how I would go through my day. Okay, well, I'm not doing enough. No one has a back. I'm just going to do all these things. I'm going to add more to my list because I'm the only person that can do it. And then eventually I'm always disappointing myself because it's like I'm overwhelmed. So I'm adding more to my to-do list. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
So it's like, now it's like, okay, when I start out work, like there'll be times where I like start looking at my emails and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all these things. I will like, I'll stop. I'm like, Brenna, we don't want to operate from the space with your nervous system dysregulated. So I write my to-do list and I'm like, okay. And then I check off and I write everything, like send this letter, like even the small tasks so I can see everything that I'm doing. And then I feel much calmer. And at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I did accomplish a lot because there will always be more. I'll always find a way to not be enough. And so it's like, but at least have a visual.
Well, and I like that you're touching on the fact that sometimes you acknowledge that those old feelings and old triggers kind of pop up again, and you start to enter that default. It's like, I feel like I view our default mode as like what we were raised with and like what's natural and comfortable for us to go to, like our comfort zone.
Yeah.
So what are ways that you guys have found that you catch yourself like when you're kind of regressing back into that default mode that you no longer want to be in?
Subscribe to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feeling of being overwhelmed, like you say, I notice I'll get more irritable. But I've learned in that too is to identify how I'm breathing. Like I notice when I'm stressed and I'm busy, my breath is shallow and very short. And yeah, I'm not even breathing in deep. And that's a way that I need to check myself. Is like, okay, Joann, first breathe. Breathe in deep. Make sure your belly rises and falls. Get in that calm state. Music just to get your body moving a little bit, because for me, I feel like music is a way for me to just kind of like move out those emotions, like shake something.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, what do you have to do? But just like you said, prioritizing like my list. Because if I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's like, whose expectation is this? Is this mine? Is this someone else's? Am I overwhelmed with my to-do list at work? Okay, let's prioritize, and then all the stuff I have to do after, it's like, don't worry about that right now. Just check your boxes. And then second half of the day, you have your other list to do too, but I just make sure that I check my emotional state and kind of give myself some tools to feel better, which is the breath work. And for me, it's movement.
Yeah. And
I think one of my methods, I love that. I think that's a great tip. It's like, I think anytime I feel like I'm feeling ungrateful or like negative or self-deprecating, it's like I try to mentally like meditate for a minute and write down all of the things I'm actually really grateful for, all the things that are going right in life right now, instead of hyper-focusing on my lacks or what's missing or what I'm not doing. And it's like, that instantly, I feel like soothes me and helps boost me up. It's like focusing on that gratitude and having a daily gratitude practice is like huge for me, and staying positive and not letting those creeping feelings, those subconscious messages creep in. But taking time to meditate and breathe, I think those things all help me realize, like, relax. It's like anytime I feel like an old way or an old cycle, it's like, hold on, we don't have to stay here. Let's get back to our new baseline. Like this is not welcome,
I mean, so much of it is like nervous system dysregulation. And I think that's the thing that's interesting to me. It's like, even with my whole like conflict thing, right? It's like, this is like your nervous system feeling dysregulated, this fight or flight. And it's like, I don't want to operate at a fight or flight, freeze, fawn. I want to operate of like calm, easy. So it's like, and even meditation, breath work, like this is all you trying to like calm your nervous system. Like me trying to like write a list of like, okay, it's like, it's meditative. The gratitude is meditative. Like prayer is meditative. Breath is like, even movement is like releasing that energy, right? And I think I didn't even realize like breath for me and movement was how important that was for me to release energy until we did that breath work class with Mindset with Mads. Check her out. She's awesome. But it was interesting because I was like, oh my gosh, this breath work, like I felt like I released 10 years of trauma, even though it wasn't like anything in my head that was new that I didn't understand, but it was like my body needed to release it. And so it's interesting to me how like once we're able to kind of get rid of some of that like energy, like we feel so much calmer, and exercise and breath, I think, is one of those ways that have been helpful to me. And even my bath time is really, I take like 45-minute baths, and I turn the lights down, light a candle. Sometimes I'll listen to music. Sometimes I'll listen to like a guided meditation, but it's just like quiet time. My kids are asleep. And I feel like it's like a gift I'm giving myself, and it like calms my whole body down to where I can like sleep restfully, but it also feels like a gift I'm giving myself. Yeah. But
I'm realizing that it's going to be unique to you. Like everyone's different, because I hate baths. Like I love that it's great for you. I love that for you. But I feel gross in baths. But for me, journaling and like being very grateful, I feel like those things are huge tools. And it's like, I know that's not for everyone, but I get why you like mixing that physical with the mental meditation. Yeah. For me, it's like I have such a hard time being present and being calm. Like I'm go, always trying to multitask and do things. So for me, like actively writing and thinking is what kind of helps me get into that flow state and realize like where my mind is actually at.
And see things for how they are.
Yes, but it's like you have to be open to try a bunch of different stuff and see like what works the best. Yeah. Like you said, music and dancing, like that's huge for you.
Yeah, I'm just a physical person. But I have been starting to implement this. I'm trying to do it in the morning, but it's just in the morning. I got too much to do. So it's more of a nighttime thing. A grounding exercise that Liset had taught, and it's basically just connecting with love. And so me and my daughter have started to do it, where she'll sit on my lap and I'll put my hand over her heart and we'll close our eyes and I'll just tell her like, think about love. Like, think about how much you love mom. And so we'll kind of I'll hold her there, and we connect to love, and then we imagine that love is a light, and it's going to shoot down to the earth, connect with the earth, and then it's going to shoot back up and connect to heaven, and then we're there, and we're protected in love. And so I try to do that to just like, let me get rid of everything that I've accumulated during the day. All that stress. Like for me, I'm going to tune into that light. My light is love. And it's my way to kind of release. I mean, I do like to journal before, like anything that happened to me, but it's just that last piece before I go to sleep, at least so that I can relax, because I know myself, when I am tense physically, like it's in my neck and I can't sleep, and then it's just affecting me the whole day. I'm trying to do this more in the morning too, to protect me from that, but that's the next step.
Well, that's beautiful that you're giving your daughter a tool. And I think something that I like to do with my kids is like a similar thing, but it's I have them close their eyes, and it's usually at nighttime, right before we're going to go to bed. And it's like, put yourself in a bubble, a protected bubble, you know, flood it with violet light. It's going to purify everything. Now let's flood it with white light, and we'll throw in a dash of peace and comfort and love and protection. And it's like, all right, you're safe. You're safe in this bubble. And we're only going to allow that suits our highest self to enter. And we're going to excuse everything that does not promote us to our highest self. And then I'll ask them some things they're grateful for. You know, what's something that you're super grateful for? And it's really touched my heart, because at first you feel, I'm like, oh, am I kooky? My kids think I'm weird. I don't know. Like, is this helping them? I don't know. And then the other night, my daughter, as she's kind of going to sleep, she was like, Mom, like, I really have a good life. Like, I love my life. I love my family. I'm so grateful for this and this and this. And I was just like, it just warmed my heart. I'm like, I'm doing something right. And like the fact that she's wanting to just openly share this with me, and she's feeling this way as she's going to sleep. I'm like, okay, like we need to keep doing this, and they can handle it. They're not too young to not get it. Like they're getting it and practicing it.
Well, and even with both your examples, it's like you guys are being intentional about your love with your daughter. Like I'm taking out time with you to touch you, to feel you, so you can feel I love you. Like feel how much I love you, and like just let's feel this for a second. And I think so much of as a kid is like, you feel the energy around you, but you don't really know what it is. So sometimes you mix those messages of like, well, is this what love is supposed to feel like? Or is this, but it's like, you're sitting there like, hey, this is love right here. Like just in this moment. And then it's like, and you're being like, hey, I like you're the physical touch of the whole thing. Like you said, like, let's talk about our day. And it's like, that's the stuff they'll hopefully remember. I mean, hopefully they forget some of the other things we mess up. But it's like at the end of the day, knowing that like, no, my mom really tried to be intentional with her love with me. And like, hey, this is what this is. And naming it. Like, let's feel this. It feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
Because my daughter is just like me. She is a big ball of energy. I mean, you guys know my daughter. She's like wild.
Kendall later.
She is, and she's so emotional too, but she's also very physical. And that's what I've known about my, healing my inner child, is they all wanted me to cuddle them. And so I do love being held. And you guys know I'm not a good hugger, but that's because I wasn't grown. I wasn't raised with affection, but I didn't realize how much I crave it. Like my inner child really wants it. And so for me, when I see my daughter, I'm like, she is me. So I want to give her that love. I want her to feel my love for her. And also that's why I want her to sit on my lap, because I want to hold you too. And I want us to share this.
It's a way you're calm. And it's like you're calming your nervous system touch, like physical touch. Like you guys are kind of doing all of those things.
Yeah.
I know.
I love this topic. Like I know we could go into all these different caveats,
part two.
But yeah, I'm part two. But I appreciate you guys like opening up and sharing that inner child experience. I think it's such an excellent tool that anyone can, tap into if they're wanting to on their own, or, with help with someone like Liset that can kind of help them greet their younger self. But I do appreciate all the healing that it can create, and all the thoughtfulness that it can even promote.
Yeah.
I think it's a really, really awesome thing. And I think being able to teach your kids different tools in a different way, it's going to have a positive trickle down effect and help them to not hold the same traumas and realize they have the power to do things different.
Yeah, and also to break that cycle, you know, because it's like all of this healing inner child. I know my parents have an inner child they need to heal, and so on and so on. So it's like I want to do my part and break it for my child and our generations moving forward.
Yeah. Well, and it's even like, I think, seeing your parents too, and like I think the more we heal ourselves, the more other people have permission to heal themselves too.
Yes.
And seeing that, and it's at the end of the day, I think it's about bringing more empathy and love to your relationships, to your family. And that's what it's about.
Well, and like you just said, when we're able to be vulnerable, it gives people space and permission to be vulnerable too. Yes. And that's just in and of itself is like a huge gift.
That's
like,
real connection.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like this table.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll for sure have to do part 2 because I feel like we didn't even touch half the things about, like, tips on, I mean, I think we talked about like bringing awareness to a breathwork meditation, but even how to use your emotions as tools and signals with your body, be more embodied. So
we'll do a part 2.
We'll do part 2. But thanks, guys. This was fun.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Awaken Your Ego, a podcast that explores biohacking and self-discovery. We hope you follow us on Instagram and Facebook to stay up to date on what we're working on in your area.